And joining us now is Mike Ginelli, who is the program manager for the Apollo Challenger Columbia Lessons Learned program.
Thanks for being on the show, Mike.
Thank you for the invitation.
Now, this program is near and dear to your heart. Can you tell us a little bit about that Lessons Learned program?
Certainly. The Apollo Challenger Columbia Lessons Learned program is a brand new innovative effort, agency-wide, to take the lessons of the past and showcase them towards a future perspective. So we're looking at a very exciting future for NASA. We've got exciting programs such as SLS going back to the moon by 2024, and a host of other programs and missions that the agency is having. With those new programs and missions also come a brand new workforce, thousands of new people. And a lot of those folks haven't had the time yet to bridge the lessons of the past to the future. And that's our responsibility. So we're taking a look at the past, both the things we did right and the things we could have done better, putting them through that lens, focusing on the future, so therefore they can take the lessons of the past, look at the future, and apply those to increase their mission success going forward.
So with Apollo, Challenger, and Columbia, and we're looking at the tragedies that were involved with those three.
We primarily focus on Apollo 1, Apollo 13, Challenger, and Columbia. We teach the lessons of how things could have gone better. However, we also do take time to look at the good things, because through 60 years plus of NASA history, there's a lot of great lessons of NASA's done things really, really well. For example, STS-1, the first launch of Space Shuttle Columbia in 1981, was a stunning success, the first reusable spacecraft in the world. So we want to take examples like that and showcase them, because all the new vehicles coming online, both commercial and NASA, will have their first processing flows and their first launches. So we can glean a lot of great expertise and knowledge from those times as well. So it's a mix both of things we could have done better, plus times we got it spot on right.
Now, a part of that program is the Columbia Room, where you have artifacts from the tragedy of Columbia Space Shuttle. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Certainly. When we lost Columbia on February 1st, 2003, we had an effort, the largest ground search in American history, to bring Columbia home. Once that was completed, the decision by our leadership at the time was to make Columbia accessible to the workforce, and is accessible for the purpose of teaching. So Columbia now still has a mission to perform. The crew still has a job to do, and that job is to teach and inspire the next generation. So folks that come into the Columbia Preservation Room will see artifacts of Columbia. As they walk through those, it's a storytelling journey, explaining what happened, but also the lessons that came out of every single phase of the flight, of how decisions were made, and how perhaps in some ways we could have made better decisions. So they can then take those examples, take them back into the workplace, and as they're working on their programs and missions, they can reflect back and hopefully serve as an instrument of guide to them going forward. If they reach those decision points, they can use that as a tool making the right decisions forward.
And of course, there's some sensitivity to that. We want to be very respectful of the family, so you don't allow us going in there and doing the show in there or showing video from that, although people can visit it.
The families have been unbelievably gracious in allowing us to share Columbia with our workforce for teaching purposes. We thank them very much for that. We take really good care of Columbia and protect her very well, as if she was still solid flight hardware flying. So we want to protect the dignity and the respect and reverence of the room. And within those constraints, we take folks in the proper way and make it a teaching, a learning environment, if you will.
Now, as you started this program, how important was it to you to get senior leadership behind this?
That's one thing when you start a brand new program up, buy-in and collaboration is key. So my first step was to approach our senior leadership. I am so humbled and thankful that our senior leadership stepped right up and gave full support and backing to the creation of this program. And that support has not only continued, but it's strengthened over the last couple of years. So in great appreciation to our leadership for helping us.
Speaking of leadership, we had a chance to sit down with Bob Cabana to get his perspective on the Apollo Challenger Columbia Lessons Learned program. Let's check it out. Bob, I know you're very familiar with the Lessons Learned program, but tell me a little bit about your history with the program.
So it's one of the things I'm very proud of here at the Kennedy Space Center. Mike Ginelli has just done an outstanding job. And what we don't want to do is forget the lessons learned from the past. You know, after the Challenger accident, they just kind of took what remained a Challenger and buried it in a silo. And it was like, we want to forget about this and move on. Columbia was different. We have Columbia in a room preserved over in the vehicle assembly building. And it's actually used by universities. Folks can get parts loaned out to them for research to help make spacecraft better, to learn about the impacts of, returning in that kind of environment, what we can do to make it better. But the more important part is not just the way we have treated the hardware, but it's also how we treat our people and the lessons that we want to remember from this. You know, if you look at Apollo, Challenger, Columbia, all the time when you go back, the hardware was talking to us, and Challenger was the normalization of deviancy, that we had O-rings that were bad, we saw soot, but we came to accept it because nothing bad happened. And then you look at Columbia, the foam's coming off, but nothing bad has happened, and we accepted it. We don't want to forget that. And part of, Apollo, Challenger, Columbia lessons learned is helping to keep it in the forefront, to help folks see what we learned so that we don't repeat those mistakes again, and help to create an environment where people are listened to.
Yeah, I imagine that's very important, that idea of, not letting things become rote and letting them just continue as they were, but constantly being vigilant about looking at all our processes and things like that moving forward.
No, I mean, nothing that we do is without risk if it's worthwhile. And flying in space is an extremely risky business. But, we've been given this goal now. Boots on the moon by 2024, right? And I'm all in. I want to see that happen. But we have to do it in an environment that allows people to speak up. Now, that doesn't mean we do what you want to do, but we have to address people's concerns. I greet all our new employees every 2 weeks when they come on board, and I talk about our core values, and I talk about lessons learned from Challenger and Columbia, and the need to create an environment in your meetings where you feel free to speak up. And we hire a lot of really smart people, okay? But when you're new and you're going to a meeting, sometimes you may know something, but you think, oh, all these other people, they're a lot smarter than me. They've been here a lot longer. They know more than I know. I'm just going to be quiet and listen. And what we have to do is ensure that we get everybody's input so that the decision makers are making informed decisions. And so it's incumbent upon us who are leaders, you have to stimulate discussion. If nobody's speaking up, then you have to ask questions to stimulate that discussion and get people talking so that all the concerns are addressed so that we make our decisions in an informed manner. I had an all hands the other day, and I said, let me see a show of hands out in the audience. How many of you were not here when we lost Columbia? And it was close to half the audience raised their hand, all right? So that's a lot of folks that weren't part of that loss, that grieving, that learning experience that we had. So we have to find a way to make those lessons known to them. If I had my way, every new senior executive at NASA would have to walk through the Columbia room and see the results of the decisions we make. And none of the people that made any of those decisions on Apollo, Challenger, or Columbia thought they were putting the crew in harm's way. They thought they were making good decisions.
Mike, Bob talked about when Challenger happened, NASA decided sort of to close the door and put everything away and not even address it. But with Columbia, you came out and said, look, we got to change our ways.
I get that question a lot. Folks ask of, why was Challenger handled this way? Perhaps in Columbia was different. And I think the only way to really answer that question effectively is say it's a different time. The folks that handled the Challenger aftermath were doing the very best they could and doing what they thought was best to continue the program and to do what was right. And the folks in Columbia did the same. So I never look back and say which one is better, which one's worse. I say that they're different in many ways. And from having the honor for so many years of helping share Columbia with thousands of folks around the country, I can tell you that the power of Columbia to effectively change the hearts and minds of people, and the power that the crew has through their stories, through their sacrifice, has been overwhelming. So I can tell you the impact she's had and will continue to have even larger going forward. What's fascinating, one of my tour guests brought this up at one time. He said, do you realize this is the only place in the world that this exists? The only place in the world that you have a spacecraft on limited display that you can teach the lessons learned. That was a very powerful observation and insight. Even in aviation, there's not many examples where you can go and actually tour a fallen aircraft to explore. So Columbia is something extremely unique for the agency, for our country, and even for the world, because we share Columbia with our partners, international partners. And so we realize how special Columbia really is and how much potential that uniqueness can serve us in the future in a very good way.
And one last point that Bob brought up was talking about Artemis, the mission getting back to the moon by 2024, and taking all these lessons learned and applying it, like as you said before, to the next generation of engineers and scientists, and how they're going to learn about those lessons learned and apply it to SLS and to Orion and to the Artemis program.
What's amazing is when you look at history and you look at the present, there's so many similarities. History repeats itself. So we can look back and see how Apollo progressed, especially looking at the Apollo 1 accident and then Apollo 13 during the flight history of the Saturn program. And we can learn those lessons because we're flying a capsule again. Orion, in many ways, is similar to Apollo 1. Some technology, of course, will change, it'll advance. Some of our thinking, we grow and learn and do things better, hopefully. But human nature and human instincts, that's pretty consistent when you look over time. So when you look back to Titanic, when you look back way before that, accidents and the cause of accidents and human behavior, human instincts. As a matter of fact, I call it the DNA thing. If we could just fix the DNA thing, we'd be in good shape. But that's what makes us individuals and unique. So we have the understanding that we have those challenges. We're always going to have those challenges, and we can have those potential shortcomings. We have to be proactive and be ready for that and do better.